a lot of value in terms of what it means for us. I know some of you are leaders in your organization. Many of us are organizational development specialists or L&D. So the hope is that we will leave time at the end of the session to look at the actual implications and meanings for us in our roles. So we'll give it another minute or two before we start. Just seeing who's here. If you can turn on your videos, that would be fantastic. I'm really excited to introduce you to Dr. Stewart Desson, who's a remarkable human being, not just in his creations in terms of Lumina learning and fantastic dynamic solutions, but really as a personality-based Lumina motion, which has this beautiful deep dive into the soul. What are the motivators and drivers of those behaviors? We could look at leadership, Leader 360, sales, team, select. So there's many different solutions. Our key kind of foundational tool is Lumina Spark. And for that, we have the Lumina Spark portraits. If you don't have one yet, please let us know. We'd love to gift you with one. We have many virtual modules, which are really exciting. And we have been amazed that we can support and enable change virtually, as good as when we are together. So it's been an incredible experience, and we've pivoted exceptionally quickly, not just around our kind of workshops and applications from resilience and leadership and innovation, but also in terms of our qualification, which we've had amazing feedback about. We have the Lumina Splash app so that people can compare and contrast really powerfully. And we have a digital Spark coach. So this is about the lifelong learning. We're empowering the learner to own their growth journey. And that's on an ongoing basis. And this is the qualification, which is online. Stewart, I think I'm going to hand over to you for the mission, seeing as you constructed it, so it comes from your heart.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. You can just pull up the points on the slide. So we're on a mission to transform our organizations by celebrating their people one human being at a time. So what do we do? Well, we're all about exciting, continuous curiosity to get people to explore their behavior through their personality. And from an organizational perspective, we want to help organizations seek out those superheroes that they want on board and to develop. And how we do it is with really interactive exploration of personality. So we value different people's way of being. So it's about empowering individuality. That's one of our key concepts, by showing people who they truly are without the need to type them or label them or box them or reduce them in any way. And the impact is we are working at transforming organizations by celebrating their people, one human being at a time. In terms of what makes us different, there's three key things. Obviously, there's many psychometric providers and cool bits of technology in the world and on the market. But the three things we do differently: firstly, smart data, simple language. So the Lumina Spark model and emotion, it's rich, it's complex, there's different personas. Who are you underneath every day? How do you respond to pressure? 24 qualities in Spark and so on. Yeah, all that rich, smart data is made accessible through simple language, sticky languages. And the second thing that makes us different is that inherently we value different ways of being, removing any evaluative biases at the heart of what Lumina is about. So all our psychometrics are carefully balanced, so we don't overvalue extroversion at the expense of introversion and so on. And the third thing, as Nicole said, is effortlessly virtual, meaning we were born in the cloud 10 years ago. We've been around for 10 years now. Everything we do is digital and designed to be able to work remotely. So the research I'm going to present today is based on a collaboration with Henley Business School, part of the University of Reading, with myself and Dr. Joanna Suter and Dr. Tatiana Rosen. And so far we've gathered over 3,500 people. The research is still live in its final stages. We probably will get over 4,000, I think, by the end. And it's global. So the data I'm about to present to you is based on, having a cohort of 500 in China and 300 in Hong Kong and a couple of hundred in Taiwan and so on and so on. And then I think 500-600 in India, a good cohort in the UK, then Mexico's on the call and so on. So really what I'm about to share with you really is an international sample. It's largely focused on large organizations and SMEs. So we've gone into this research through our organizational contacts. So it is a piece of research focused on people in the working population. And it has leaders, managers, white collar and blue collar workers, probably a slightly higher weighting to white collar rather than blue collar in terms of the sample size, but it's a huge global sample. So please bear that in mind when we go through the numbers.
And I have to mention that we also have a nice sample from South Africa as well.
You certainly do. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you. I can see many names on the screen here who have either undertaken the research or got other people and been an advocate for it. So thank you for doing that. And one of the key things that I'm asking in different ways is, has the COVID-19 crisis, has it changed who we are? If it has, how? So Nicole, did you want to ask the group something around this?
Yeah, I thought it'd be really interesting before you share your results on this, just to see what everybody thinks. So if you want to just write on the chat, what would be your predictions or expectations around the type of changes that you've observed yourself, either with your clients or with colleagues or people you know, or even your family? How's it actually impacted people's personalities, well-being, ways of working? What have you actually observed? And then it'd be interesting to do a comparison with the actual results. So I'm going to click on the gallery if you want to do the same. Sorry, I'm actually going to stop the share for a moment. And if people want to just put some thoughts in the chat, it'd be interesting to see what you think. So some people become more insular and
isolated. Some of these things you will see in the data I'm about to present. So isolation across the globe is up. And the impact of remote working is the biggest change in our external environment.
Make it a surprise for them.
Okay, don't want to spoil it. Okay.
But yeah, so there's some alignment there. Okay, so so definitely some people become more insulated, isolated, more caring. That's really an amazing observation. I've seen that even on a lot of these webinars, people starting with, you know, how are you, and really stopping to listen. And that's happening a lot within team meetings as well.
And some people, their empathy is up in the SPARK model as well, when we do a before COVID and a during COVID. Not for everybody, but for some people it's up. Yeah.
We've got to create suspense, Stewart. Not yet. Hold it. So multitasking, working with children at home. I mean, that's fascinating, and how that's become also a lot more. I've observed people more open. You know, whereas before it was quite hidden if there's a child screaming or shouting in the background or needing attention, and now it's just really accepted and there's a warmth towards it. We've seen the importance of family connections, fear of death and illness, so increased anxiety, burnout. Been a real moment to pause, to rethink, accelerated an already high state of change driven by digital transformation. Are we at risk that people are going to be even more stressed and anxious by these new changes and the high rate and pace of change? The world is changing, absolutely. It all looks different. In terms of this pause, I've also been amazed by the amount of transcendence I'm experiencing people, this new kind of opening, that now's the time. There's deep introspection, deep changes happening. Someone's written here, an Esther more introspective, going from changing we back to I, amplifying normal, loneliness, more resilience, agility, empathy, compassion, patience, difficulty taking decisions. Janine become more aware of self-care, solidarity, evaluating purpose. I'm loving that opening towards this evaluating of who am I, why am I here? I feel maybe that's the reason that we've been sent COVID. Burnout, lack of connection, collectivism, how people are moved by media. Okay, so we're going to keep going. We'll keep looking at these, but some beautiful shares. So I'm going to go back to the screen. Thanks for that. So Stewart, now over to you. What have you found?
Well, in the last 6 months, you can just pull up the whole slides as we go, Nicole, to avoid the lag in the. So the context in which we work and live has changed, as a number of you have pointed out. Remote working is here to stay. I saw that in the chat box. And lots of the lockdown, that's a new experience for us. And because of that, there's many more triggers in our context, and that has changed our thoughts. So I'm going to share with you that in terms of our positive thinking, on a global scale, positive thinking is down. The metric for positive thinking has gone down a good 10% or so, using an industry standard measure of positive thinking. Our feelings and emotions have changed. On balance, as somebody highlighted, isolation is an emotion that is up, as is loneliness and some anxiety, although it's mixed. Our everyday behavior has changed in that our ability to express our personality in terms of sociability is down substantially. We're not as spontaneous in our everyday behavior, and we've become more vigilant and more risk aware in our behaviors. Of course, these are obvious responses to the external threat, and our response to stress has changed. So some of us have become a little bit more argumentative and become more triggered and so on. I'm going to provide you with the data to back up some of this. Of course, is this a real change in who we really are, or is it just the surface stuff because of the context? It's hard to say. We won't really know unless we research it again, which we plan to do in another 18 months' time. But what we know about brain plasticity is if we change our context long enough and change our thoughts, emotions, behavior, and stress response, it will eventually start to become new patterns and become a change, or rather an evolution in who we are and our way of being. So if we have a think now about what do you think employees in this crisis would like to see in this new work context? We'd like you to put that into the chat, because that was also something that's been explored in this research. What do you think if we ask employees, how would they like to be supported by their employer and others around them? So let's pop that in the chat box and have a look as well.
Fascinating, Stuart. It's a lot about flexibility, trust, support, care, wanting more feedback, but employees also taking more responsibility.
And certainly autonomy has increased, and you'll see it's a mixed picture on productivity, but people do want more emotional support. That does speak to what, of course, all of us do at Lumina Learning, which in part is to provide understanding of who we are and emotional support for ourselves and between each other. So more psychological safety.
Hi, Lisa.
And there is more emphasis on the employer providing the necessary tools and environment so that we're not stressed out, so it doesn't impact our well-being or our mental health. We certainly know that being ambiguous, when employers are ambiguous and leave things open and people are confused, that impacts mental health. So we need to communicate even more than we thought we were already doing. Yeah. Would you add any more to that, Nicole?
I've just put your slide up now around your actual findings.
Okay, thank you for that. So there are many, many findings here, but if I try to turn it just into 4 from the employee's perspective, remote working is a permanent shift. Only 10% of people want to go back to work full time and never do any remote working again. 90% of people in varying degrees want more remote working now they've sampled it. Now, obviously, the nature of this sample, I did say, is geared towards people who, remote working is a possibility. So this is 90% of people that can work remotely in their role are saying they would now like to do so. People want more connection with colleagues managing their organization, and they want more clarity from their organization as to how to work remotely and what they need to do. They want emotional support, so people are more looking for coaching support or whatever an organization can provide. And we know there's been a huge uptake in Lumina Emotion as a product over the last 6 months, and there's been a lot more coaching done with Lumina Resources than the 6 months before. And people want practical but also technical support. The technical support is it is up there with people saying, can you make my PC work and make Zoom work and so on, but also practical support around clarity of objectives and processes and ways of working. So that's it at a high level. If we drill in now.
Can I just share with you, I just found the stats that I was looking for in the Economist of this week, and it's just aligned to your results.
Yeah.
They found in Germany, where people are really full-time going back to work, 74% of office workers now go to their place of work, but only half of them are now working 5 days a week. So when you're talking about this permanent shift around integrating this remote working.
Yeah. So a few facts overall. According to the data in terms of a self-analysis, 9%, almost 10% of people believe that they've had COVID. Now, of course, maybe they have, or maybe they think they've had and they've not been tested adequately, but that's quite a big statistic on a global basis. 1 in 10 people have been furloughed or laid off in some way, shape or form, and nearly half know somebody in their family or someone close who has. 1 in 20 people, 4.8%, almost 5, have actually been made redundant in this survey. That's consistent globally as well. And we know that being made redundant is a major cause of a lack of well-being and a reduction in mental health. And we nearly 30% have a family friend or member who's been made redundant. Mental health issues are on the rise in this data. So 11% have had a mental health issue during lockdown. And 1 in 20 of us have got a close family member or a friend who's actually died during this period of COVID. And that, roughly speaking, according to the data we've looked at here, means we're experiencing sort of twice as many deaths of close family friends and members as we would have done in the previous 6 months, which is a pretty big increase. So the context has changed. Now, this is data on productivity and autonomy. Productivity is mixed. If you have a look at the left-hand side, some people are saying, I'm more productive, but when you drill into it, it's the people who have started experiencing working from home for the first time and they've got the proper kit. On the right-hand side, the people who are less productive are the people who are being forced to continue in the workplace when others have left them, or they've experienced disruption to their work through going part-time and so on. But across the board, autonomy is up, and autonomy is generally up for the people who are experiencing remote working and on the whole are tending to like it. I'm going to ask us to use the stamp feature now because I also measured, has people's anxiety gone up or gone down? Do we feel more disconnected from colleagues, more or less? Are we feeling more or less isolated? Are we feeling excluded? So for example, if you think that you have been much more isolated, you're going to click on View Options, Stamp, and maybe choose a star. And if I feel more isolated a lot more, I'll click it here. If I'm feeling less anxious for whatever reason, I would tick it over here. You get the idea. So let's just do it now. So all of you will score 5 times on this continuum. And let's just have a look and see if the cohort today, everyone on the call today, how similar or different you might be from the research sample. So the anxiety is a bit to the left, so people are either the same level of anxiety or a bit more, it looks like. It looks like people are feeling somewhat more disconnected from colleagues. Isolation is increased as well, although there's one person that's less isolated. Interestingly, in the data, the people that feel less isolated are those that already worked remotely and found it difficult joining conference calls where they were the only person remote. And now everybody is working remotely. They actually feel more connected. So there are some winners in this. Exclusion, again, more. Loneliness seems to be more split. Interesting. So Nicole, if you move it on a slide, you'll see what the data actually said across the board, and it'll be superimposed on top.
I'll save this out.
It's just the next slide, Nicole. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just saving this quickly.
Are you taking a picture? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to clear it and move on.
Okay, so if we have a look at the data here, it's quite similar to the cohort here today. Anxiety's up. Now it does vary by country. So in China, anxiety is up when people are worried about their jobs and the possibility of losing them. In some other countries like the UK, anxiety is up as if you're having to continue to go and work during this period where the risk to your health is high. So there are two drivers to anxiety. One is sort of an economic unemployment driver, and the other is a health driver. Both can make us more anxious. And as I said earlier, isolation is on the increase, apart from those that were already remote, and they're feeling less isolated. So if we move on now, this is a little bit more complex, but bear with me because this is breaking down the very same data, but it's breaking it down. If you look at the yellow bar, it's people that work remotely and on site. The gray bar are those who are remote, but previously they were in a workplace. The orange bar is those that are remote, but they've always been remote anyway. And the blue ones are people that are in a workplace and have continued in a workplace. So if we flick through the key points, you'll see that the loneliness, people less impacted by loneliness are those who normally work remotely anyway. And in terms of exclusion, remote workers are feeling less excluded. They're feeling more, people are joining their world. Isolation is increased for those in the orange and the blue category. So particularly the, isolation is less for people who are in a workplace or they normally work remotely. It's more for others who've changed. Disconnection is at its maximum for those that were remote and were not remote and now they're new full-time remote workers. And anxiety is higher for those that are having to continue to go into a workplace when others aren't and have the anxiety around the public transport and the risk of the disease. And autonomy is higher, much, much higher for those, and productivity is higher for those who've switched to become remote workers for the first time, which is partly why they're not wanting to come back. Yeah. So if we move on, this is a measure in the research of mental health. Who's been experiencing a mental health issue? And you can see it varies very much by country. So Australia, India, Hong Kong, South Africa, they're the ones that have higher percentage of people reporting a mental health issue. And China, Albania were the countries that had lower incidence of mental health issues. Now, there could be cultural factors here. I know certainly 30 years ago, it was not acceptable in the UK to admit to a mental health issue. You needed to keep it quiet. That's changed culturally. So there could be, and there inevitably will be, cultural aspects in here as well. Nevertheless, it's pretty clear from the data that there is strong evidence that mental health has been impacted in the last 6 months. So moving to the next slide. This, with full permission, is in fact my partner and wife, Deb. And this is her splash on the left before COVID, which had been pretty stable for quite a number of years. So Deborah is largely discipline-driven, outcome-focused and extroverted, much more of the red energy. During the crisis, this on the right is her splash. She has necessarily had to increase her inspiration-driven to cope with the ambiguity and have to respond more flexibly to what's going on and let go of some of her need to have everything ordered. And her big picture thinking has increased, which Deborah tells me is because there's more sort of enforced time for reflection, slightly less sociability, but that's been replaced with more contemplation and reflection, which sits in big picture thinking, where and links to our imagination. So,
is there a question?
Now, was there a question there?
Okay, no.
Not quite, no worries. Now, not everybody has changed in this way. Let's have a look at another example. This is Nikita Mikhailov, my good friend and colleague. And this is his splash before COVID with a balance on the discipline-driven, inspiration-driven and lower people-focused. And on the right-hand side, we can see Nikita's 24 qualities, but broken down in terms of the 3 personas. So we can see, for example, his tough in the top right, 93% tough underneath, he's direct and clear. It goes down every day, 26, and then it comes back up under pressure. If you flick forward, Nicole, you'll see visually the shift. During the crisis, his people focus is up. Can anybody notice, if Nicole, if you just flick backwards and forwards once or twice, can anybody notice the key qualities on the right that are shifting? So that's during COVID, pre-COVID. Can anybody see some of the shifts that have been happening to Nikita? You can unmute and shout it out or tap it in the box. What do you reckon?
I'm really interested, knowing Nikita as well, that his tough every day has increased.
Yeah, so I've had a few dialogues with him around this. We've had a mutual peer coaching relationship, and he says under the pressure of it, he's become more direct with people. At the same time, he's really working hard to be more collaborative.
Yeah.
So his collaborative has gone up and his empathy has gone up because he's found himself in a new context where he's coaching people more using Zoom with less physical contact, and he's trying to understand and show more empathy. So empathy and collaboration up, but so is tough.
11 to 52% increase on his everyday empathy.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yes.
But it's costing him empathetic to overstretch, overextended. So
yeah, so the risk is he becomes tired through that. That's the risk. If you overextend your empathy, you're almost too concerned for other people, take on board too many of their feelings.
Have his overextended rates gone up?
I think they have, on average, a bit, yes. And that is a pattern in the data as well. So, you know, globally, on average, our overextensions have increased a bit over this period. Now, I've given you two examples here with Nikita and my wife, Deborah. Of course, everybody's different and unique. There are a few underlying patterns, which I'll share in a moment, but much more of interest if you're coaching somebody is to get their actual splash from a year ago and get their splash from now and compare them.
Davisha, do you want, I'm going to just...
At NetBank, they switched off all the air cons. They're opening the windows.
Sorry,
they're refusing to put the air cons on.
I think you might need to mute her, Nicole.
Okay. Oh, Lauren, will you help me with that? So what we're really interested in looking at now is for you to think about from your own personality perspective. So you can see here, we've got the 4 color archetypes going into the 8 aspects. And for each of these aspects, there are 3 what we call smart qualities. So in terms of here, you can use again the stamp, but just a question that we wanted to ask you is, which behaviors have you particularly drawn on over the last 6 months? So they're likely already to be a strength, and you've kind of been dialing them up, or you've been calling upon some of these areas. Maybe they've even become new strengths. So great, someone's just started conceptual. So that's...
I've become myself a little bit more measured, more working at home with a less busy schedule makes me more contained and thoughtful. Nicole, if you're the host, you can go down and do a bit of muting to anyone that's not muted.
It's not until you fall that you fly when you chase.
That's a nice song. We'll keep that one. Okay, Lauren, I think we're both clicking the mute at the same time, so I'll let you do it, okay? Even though I like her taste in music.
So we can see sort of emerging here, there is a cluster around people focus. So we seem to have drawn, on average, a bit more on collaboration and empathy in this period. There's also been a bit more imagination and radical, which does link to introspection and having the time more alone to do that. And you can see not many of you have ticked extroversion, although a few have gone for takes charge, because sometimes you need to take charge of your business to get the revenue in, but there's probably more on the introverted side.
Not much sociability.
Yeah, sociability is the one that's taken the biggest hit in this period because we're lacking the opportunities to do it. Yeah.
Interestingly, if we look at us as a group, the 2 where there's no signs is spontaneous and sociable.
Yeah, being spontaneous could literally kill you at this point. So it is a more dangerous behavior. There's a little cluster of people around caution. We've all taken a step in the cautious direction, either instinctively or because the governments have forced us to be more cautious.
I think this in itself is quite an interesting piece of research, Stewart.
It is. I've taken a screenshot of it, Nicole, so that when we share the slides afterwards, we can maybe add this in so you can all see it as a reminder.
Like the and tiredness and exhaustion, that we can flip over, you know, prefrontal cortex flips, and we start expressing more of our overextension. So
You want to move it on a screen?
yeah, I just need to close this bar. Sorry, I wasn't sure why it wasn't happening. Let me just clear this one first so we are getting true data, because some people have started clicking. Clear all, okay. Okay. So now you can see how the definitions have changed from what was positive. For example, logicals become argumentative, competitive, win at all costs, tough seeks conflict. So we've got a few ticks there. And the introversion, which we're also ticking, you know, every day is about being quite intimate.
And it's normally associated as well with some inner talk, some inner critic, or something that's running in your mind that puts you into the overextended place. And this is generally, on average, on the increase the last 6 months on a global basis. Yeah. It is interesting, more people are being triggered around the introverted side of the mandala than the extroverted side. But aside from that, it's fairly even spread, a little bit more on a lot of us have become emotionally stretched. A whole cluster of people have got unfocused, wondering what to do in the chaos of it all. But some people have responded by being more goal focused and having a plan.
Okay, wonderful.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'll just do a screenshot of it, Nicole, as well, and we can move on.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, for sharing that. Instant research, instant poll. So I've now got some data to share with you about the impact on our mental health. So if you just flick through and bring all the slides up, Nicole.
Would you mind, Stuart, before we go into the mental health, let's just have a look at what the impact has been on on us. So I actually just prepared a Menti, menti.com. If you don't mind clicking on that on your mobile, on your cell, with this code 9203326. And again, it's really interesting looking at your experience and comparing it with Stuart's data results. So to please rate the impact of COVID-19 on your positive thinking, because as Stewart shared, he's got a specific scientific positive thinking research measure, but just to do it at a face value. So I'm going to...
So are we more positive, less positive? I certainly know some people that have responded very positively. If I'm very honest with myself, Stuart's positive thinking is definitely down over the last 6 months. Just there have been just too many triggers in my environment, financially and health-wise, for me to maintain it at its normal buoyant level.
Okay, so it's coming up on the screen now. So interesting. So hopefully when you see it, you've got it in the right order, but this is coming up with a highest first on the screen. Yeah. So the highest is it's slightly lower.
Then significantly lower, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, the picture is mixed. We do know that positive thinking is a totally personal thing. And we know the triggers in the environment are completely personal to us as well. It's all about, you know, underneath what we believe and how we process our emotions. But on balance, it seems that positive thinking has taken a hit. Yeah. Although the picture is as with the research I'm about to share with you, it's mixed.
Yeah, and it's changing now. We're seeing slightly high. Because what I'm interested in, it could be unbiased because of the training that I'm doing a lot on resilience at the moment, is that people are learning a new skill set. So I would say in the beginning would be really significantly lower. And as it's sustained and continued over time, people are having to really dig deep inside and reactivate that positive thinking as a way of survival, but also recognizing that how critical it is that this is here to stay in terms of the changes. So how can I shift my mindset so that I can cope and hopefully even move into that possibility of thriving. And so overall still slightly lower.
But of course, there's a role for all of us in the work that we do to help individuals and organizations get their positive thinking, you know, back on track and explore why it might be down and help them with practical techniques to become, to reframe things and become more optimistic. There's plenty of research. There's a big study in China that showed that the people who can be more positive and optimistic have got a much higher chance of not having a mental health problem. So it does, if we can be more positive, it is a form of inoculation, or it certainly helps.
Definitely. So I'll leave this Menti on. If you haven't done it yet and you want to add, please do. And I'm just going to switch back to your slides.
Thank you.
What your research actually found.
So there are a number of aspects to positive thinking, and I've used an industry standard academic measure. And the one that's taken the biggest hit is at times the future seems unclear to me. And you can see it's moved from the midpoint to sort of 65, heading for 70%, is, you know, people's views are now more unclear, which is of course what you'd expect. There are many aspects of positive thinking that haven't changed so much. If you move to the next slide, you know, there are, you know, do we feel proud? We still do. Are people generally there for us? They generally still are. Are we feeling confident in ourselves? It's a bit more mixed. Are we satisfied? So many of the measures of positive thinking haven't changed much. The one at the bottom is also a forward-looking one. I have great faith in the future. That's one that's taken a hit as well. Yeah. As a comment there, the questions may be ambiguous. You are right, although it is an industry standard global measure that's used in lots of studies, which is why I used it for this research. In terms of our personality, its introversion and our risk reactor behaviors have increased. The biggest increase, so in the research people were asked, you know, what's gone up, what's gone down, as well as measuring it directly. Reflection is increased. So that's an increase in introversion and big picture thinking, to contemplate more. An increase in vigilance, which is what we might expect because there's risks that could be really harmful to us. And what's down, spontaneous and sociable are down. Now these are on average. For you, it could be the opposite. Some people have got more sociable because they love Zoom and they chat to more people than ever. But on average, it's down. But the individual differences are probably more important than the averages, particularly as we're all individuals. So in terms of income, has it impacted our income in the last 4 months? Well, almost half of us, 46%, income's about the same. Only 7% of us have had our incomes go up, and across the globe, so this is global data, you know, 47% of people have had their income go down, and 1 in 5 by a massive amount of 35%. Of course, we know this, but these are the hard facts that sort of back it up from this research. This has an impact on our mental health. Are we working harder? Well, 1/3 of people are working about the same. 1 in 5 are working fewer hours, but tragically, they're people who are being laid off and working part-time. Those of us that are still full-time at work, 43% are saying we're working harder and longer than ever before. So we might be working at home, but we're putting in more hours, although we're not commuting. So there's a bit of a saving there. If we have a look now at how many people want to come back to work. So only 10% don't want to work remotely at all and saying, please get me back to the office. I would include my wife, Deborah, in that category. Myself and Deborah and my son, Dan, we're not really suited to working at home together, sharing the same kitchen. So varying degrees dependent on your household circumstances. But most people want to work remotely at least some of the time. Yeah. And a hardcore want to be remotely permanently. Yeah.
So 48% is exactly the same results that The Economist found, that those wanting to work some of the time, 50%.
And I certainly know for Lumina Learning, we have 33 staff in Camberley, and pretty much all of them want to come back to work maybe 2-3 days a week. Really? And we're just redoing our office and figuring out how to accommodate the new world, given that we've proven that we can work remotely, or at least the majority of the roles can. Then we want to do that. And I think many organizations are going through that thinking process. When we ask people what are the challenges working remotely, the top of the list is lack of connection with colleagues, and difficulty separating my home and my personal life. And my workspace at home is not ideal. Again, that's very mixed. I've got a nice office here at home, so I wouldn't be ticking that box. But one of my sons, you know, has moved into a small flat somewhere with other colleagues, and it's not great for him to have to work at home, and so on. If we have a look at the next one, it's going to explain to us something about how it impacts our mental health. So interestingly, in this period, when people shift to working remotely, there is a lack of clarity over their objectives because they have less daily contact with people in their work environment. And this is showing you a risk of mental health. So in the research we had an industry standard measure which looked at your risk of having a mental health issue. And if you're not sure if you're meeting expectations, if the communication from your organization is not clear, that will put increased pressure on your mental health. And the people that have confidence that they're meeting the organization's expectations with good communication have a much lower risk of a mental health issue. In terms of why do we want to work remotely, the biggest thing is saving time and better work-life balance, which is really another way of saying I'm saving time because the commute goes into my whole life, not just my work. People like autonomy. People believe they're more productive. And then people want to save money due to commuting. And people also made comments as well that they want to be more green and help the environment by doing less commuting. So those are the key drivers. Spending more time with family is another way of saying I'm saving time commuting. In terms of not wanting to work remotely, it's all about lack of connection with colleagues, not being able to socialize and so on, and finding it that it's probably more effective at work. Some people, of course, have to be at work in a workplace, but for many people, they're just more productive at work. So interesting, some are more productive at work and some are more productive at home. And we need to accommodate those individual differences. Yeah. So what support do employees want from their employers? Top of it is, please help me to work remotely. And second, help me manage my stress, help me balance my responsibilities, help me be safe. And then coming in at number 5 is, can you give me more emotional support? That's coming ahead of, interestingly, giving me technical support to make my Zoom and my PC work. So there's lots of work here to do for people in our industry around helping people cope with stress, helping people cope with boundaries, helping people get emotional support. There's a lot we can do with Spark and Emotion and other tools to support individuals and organizations. The Lumina Emotion model has got some explicit qualities that are very relevant to this crisis. So we call this the emotional reactors mandala. When we're stimulated by something in the environment, we can go one of 2 ways. If we go to the top half of this mandala, we respond confidently, optimistically, resiliently. We call this reward reactors. People are looking to the environment to get something positive. If, on the other hand, we see threats and we want to wear a mask because we're concerned about the disease and we're less likely to want to go out because of it, we could respond with vigilance or being quite impassioned. So I think impassioned is where we can be fiery and volatile, and there is an increase in people's negative effect in this period. This links, of course, to brain chemistry as well, with what's called stability and plasticity on the top side, which links to the dopamine system, and serotonin and the biological route is linked to the sort of flight response in the bottom half of the mandala. And we can, of course, measure this with Lumina Emotion and help people understand, of course, we've all got both, and what can we do to respond differently. This is a bit of research from China that just came out recently that had a huge sample and said, let's look at people coming back to work. And in this study, they found that the major risk was worrying about unemployment. And the best antidote to that was to be resilient and optimistic. So if you just go back there, Nicole, to the previous one, you can see optimism and resilience are at the top. And those are the things that help inoculate people. And of course, we can all work to help people be optimistic and resilient. These are things that we can apply techniques to process our emotions and so on.
Brilliant. So, Stewart, that's incredible research. Thank you for your consistent passion for helping us understand reality and what's really happening through the research that you do in all areas of human behaviour. The question now, we've got 10 minutes left. If anyone wants to say an extra 10 minutes, that'd be wonderful. But the big question, so, you know, what does this all mean for us? So I've just put down 2 slides here, Stewart, just to kind of summarise your key findings, if you want to just speak to them. And then the question would be, what are the implications as an L&D, as a leader of L&D or as a leader independently for your people?
Well, it's sort of suggesting, hasn't it, that the context has very definitely changed. There's a lot of data on that. Our thoughts have been impacted, particularly our positive thinking in terms of belief and faith in the future has taken a hit. Feelings and emotions are mixed, but on balance, there's more isolation. Our everyday behavior has changed. We're more vigilant, we're less spontaneous and sociable. And our response to stress has changed. Some of us are feeling more emotionally stretched. Some of us have become more argumentative and so on. And we've also found, you know, employees indeed want to work remotely, or many do, at least more often. We are yearning for more connection with our colleagues and organisation. That's what we're missing. We want emotional support, and we also want practical and technical support. So I've tried to draw out what I see as the key findings here. I will be sharing a fuller research paper in another month's time, and you'll be able to dig through the data yourselves and find many more nuggets in there too. So there is more to say on this. The research is still live if anybody wants to sneak in at the last minute with contributing to it. And as Nicole said, it's the implications for how we lead and how we support our people that are critical here. So Nicole, you'd like everyone to put it into the chat box?
Well, at the combination, we'd love to hear your perspectives. We will gather all your great ideas and share that as a follow-up to this talk with the slides. But I'd also love to hear some voices. So if you can unmute yourselves, I'll stop the share so we can see each other. But what's your thinking? You know, what does this mean for you and for the people? So yeah, if you can unmute, and we'll just, because we haven't got much time, if you can be succinct, but we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. So first,
while we're waiting for that, there's an interesting question here from Heidi Stewart. How will remote work impact the company culture? If 48% of people want to continue to work remotely, how will organizations we work with drive culture actively?
Yeah, and of course, it's a great question. Many organizations are worried that working remotely will result in less innovation. The culture will, there is a risk of becoming more siloed and so on. I would say that's the bigger risk. So maybe counteracting the downsides of remote working is part of what we need to do if we wish to shape the culture. So I would say that the job of a leader is to shape the culture. It's the Edgar Schein definition of leadership, which is a pretty tricky definition. Read what's happening in the market and the world, in this case, COVID and remote working. See what you need to do to change how we're working.
Would you mind me just asking Louise just a 1-minute view as a futurist, really interested in your perspective around impact on culture going forward?
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for the question. I think that what we're seeing is a real shift as leadership teams realize that they need to be more agile, and they need to be much more open in terms of creating environments for change and certainly creativity, innovative ideas. I think a lot of people are realizing that if they don't have the environment to enable that, they're very much stuck in, I guess, business as usual thinking in a world that certainly isn't business as usual. So I'm just hearing, in fact, I'm actually just blown away by the amount of creativity, innovation, pivots, you know, change that is coming out of teams that you thought would never move at all. So it's been quite incredible to see, but time will tell. I think once we've experienced doing something differently and we've lost that sense of fear around perhaps being more creative and innovative, we don't go back. So I think we're always going to get a division. Those organizations that are agile, who shift and move, and those who are perhaps more rooted in the past.
And yeah, and then that begs the question around survival, survival of the fittest, or survival of the one who are most agile. But definitely there will be changes in culture.
So Beth, I can see Beth's made some comments, and Beth works a lot with younger people and emerging leaders, and the impact that the crisis may have on their mental health and the long-term impact. Do you want to comment on that, Beth?
I can do. It's just really recognized. So a lot of the work that I do with Luminous Spark is with younger people, so 18 to sort of 30. And I'm really noticing that their response to COVID is really thinking about, well, where do I position myself? Where do I want to use Spark particularly, and start them off on that journey of, I know who I am, I know what I'm about, I know where I want to position myself is crucial, not only to them, but also to all of us, because they're the pipeline of employees of the future. They're the ones who are going to shift things. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, Stuart. It's just something I'm noticing.
No, well, thank you for sharing it, and thank you for the work that you do with young people to support them in that way. It's really, really inspiring.
Thank you.
We can, as we're continuing this conversation, I've just activated the Menti, which is just a final question for those of you. I know Grant has to leave shortly. Just to say, how was today for you? And we'll just create a word cloud just to get some feedback from you. It's always very, we always appreciate that. And to also say that we do run regular webinars on Discover Lumina, Discover You. If you're interested in that, let us know. And if you have the stamina, in an hour's time from now, Stewart is doing a really wonderful webinar on having experience with a Spark coach with Nikita. So Stewart,
so if you're keen, in an hour's time, 1 hour from now, I'll put the link in the chat box. Actually, you can come on and you'll hear me coaching Nikita Mikhailoff, or doing my best to coach Nikita for 20 to 30 minutes sort of live on the session. I'll just go get the URL while you do the Mentimeter, Nicole.
Okay, great. And I know it's late notice, it is an hour and it may be late for those in South Africa, but we do also run regular Discovering Lumina, Discovering You, and these other sessions. So let us know what you're interested in. And Stewart and I always love to support in any way that we can. So Lauren, your eyesight's better than mine. Any other interesting questions or views around what this data means in terms of implications, impact, or things that we can start thinking about doing more of and differently? I'd be really interested. You know, does this shift anything for anybody in terms of your own learning initiatives and learning strategies? Is there anything that you think that you may do differently now? Or is this, are these results aligned to your thinking and what your own employees are asking?
There's a good comment here from Wesley saying research also highlights, so this research also highlights what meaning you add to stress. What meaning you add to stress is what makes the difference between it being harmful or helpful, which I thought was quite an interesting insight from Wesley.
Thank you.
Just having a quick look here. Interesting to know from Janine, interesting to know the need for emotional support versus technical support. This is so very real. Thank you for the share. So, you know, which one is more important? Emotional support, tech support within the spectrum?
Janine, what are you finding at Direct Taxis? Are they calling out for more of both? Are you more focused on one than the other?
So thanks for that, Nicole. We actually find a combination, and there has definitely been an increase in staff advising that they are suffering from depression. You know, our South African story is a very real one where people come from all walks of life. So in the past, we would all join in and come to one business unit and everybody's treated the same. You don't judge that you've commuted through a taxi, a a bus and a train to get there because we're all equal in a building. Whereas now our individuals are working from home. They're working from shacks where there's blaring music. They're working from a 3-bedroom building, a house where there are maybe 6 people living in the same house, and they're battling to find space to work. So, and I don't think our story is a unique one. So it is a very real situation where we're having to identify what are tech resources that we're needing to support our people through, as well as that emotional support. So it's a combination, Nicole and everybody else, and it's a very real one. So it's about knowing when to be empathetic and when to draw the line where people are taking chances. So it's about actually knowing how to assess a situation. So we definitely deal case by case.
Well, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that, Janine, and also gives, especially us Londoners, just more appreciation, you know, of the diversity of the experiences right now. But I do feel confident that under your leadership, you'll be doing the best you can to think about and support everyone. Any other comments, Lauren?
I've got a comment, if I may.
Oh, thanks, Natalie. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much. It was really enlightening. And I think for me, what's been very supportive when I've been trying to explain to people what Lumina is and how it helps, and I think this is where the data could be so beneficial, is by asking, it's not only stoicism that I've been seeing with individuals, but they're organizations that are being very stoic about saying, yes, we are fine, we know what we're doing, everyone's okay, and yet you can hear underlying from employees that actually they are needing more support. So this data, if we could package it in a way that we could say, are you feeling this, this, and this, because you're not alone. There's so many, this is the worldwide research. That's just so much more helpful for people to actually then admit and say, yes, we are having this, or to get them to go and ask their staff, or to do some kind of intervention, and then use Lumina or us or whoever it is that they need to support them. It backs it up so brilliantly, and I think it will be fantastic to support us as well.
So thank you for saying that, Natalie, and really interesting to see that it applies pretty consistently globally. There are some country differences, but this is across the world. And of course, in a couple of weeks' time, when I've done some more analysis, I'll be able to come back and share with you data on how South Africa is similar and or different to different countries in the world. That will be fascinating too. There's more to say on this.
So I know we have sadly come to the end of our time. I'm available. Stewart, I don't know if you are, or whether you need to get on and prepare for the next webinar.
No, I'm available for a little while. And Nicole, thank you for putting this on, and thank you for inviting me in to talk to all your brilliant people and share this. It's always a delight to work with you.
Thank you so much, Stewart, and thank you for the research, for the data and the inspiration. And I know it always continues. And thank you to each of you for your engagement, interest, and wanting to make a difference in this world. So we're all in this together, and there's always amazing collaboration. So for a beautiful community. If you're not part of us just yet, we'd love you to join us. So just let us know if you're interested or would like to. But if you need to go, farewell and stay safe. And the key word that I use all the time is about going gently. And I saw someone put in the notes earlier on around the increase that they're seeing in self-care, which is just music to my ears. So that if we can breathe more, you know, I think breath is just so powerful and underrated, but just conscious breaths whenever you can, walking barefoot in the grass, bit of earthing, looking into people's eyes, especially your family, wherever you are, and as you know, how are you doing, where are you at, and really listening, refining our listening in new ways. There's amazing opportunities just in what we think are those small little things, but actually becoming really present to everything around us and to those relationships. So go gently, take care of yourself, and thank you for the great work that you all do within your organizations and with your clients.
And Nicole, Natalie just saying, please show us the Menti.
Oh yes, look, thank you.
Yes, what about the
I always say, with Natalie, I never know how I survive without her, because she always keeps me on my toes and reminds me of things like this. So thank you, Natalie. So yes, this is what you're saying, thought-provoking, interesting, enlightening.
You want to share your screen?
Oh, I'm not showing my screen. Okay, Stewart, I need you too, but you know that. Okay, and here it is. So I can't just have it to myself. There you go. Can you see that? You've got thought-provoking right across the middle. So great work, Stewart. Thank you and your team. Enlightening, interesting, insightful, fascinating, opportunities, informative, motivating, a few takeaways, unrehearsed. What does that mean? Don't we need to rehearse more? Supportive, excellent, brilliant. I think many of those who've written seem quite happy. If there's any more, keep them coming. But any Q&A, let's go back for those who've got another 5-10 minutes on the call. And we've got Stewart here, so any deeper dives, he's going to be sharing the full extent of his research and his paper soon. But any other questions you have, now's the time. So I'll include this, Natalie, in the feedback, but I'm going to just stop that share so we can see each other for now, just in case there's any more questions, conversation we can have.
Hi.
Hi, Tanisha.
So I just wanted to touch on the culture question and how leaders can promote culture during this time. And if you don't mind just elaborating a little bit more, because it's been a very interesting, like when I think of culture, I kind of get like hit a brick wall. And I mean, especially during the whole COVID time, working from home, how can, let's say for instance, promote culture within my team, or my leader promote culture within their teams?
So I'm just related to that, Tanisha. I'm just seeing Heidi State has put a comment here. Is there an opportunity in using Luminous Select to test for culture, which is quite interesting because that also could create the structure for you, Tanisha. Stewart, can you speak to that? So, I mean, we could use a team viewer as well as Select, but how do you think that could assist?
Okay, so to speak to your point, Nicole, I mean, if we're doing portraits of many people in an organization before COVID, and then we're doing a sample of how they're behaving now, we can get a sense for how the culture might be shifting, I guess, in the way that we did today when we asked everyone on the call today to do the stamping functionality. We could see that introversion was up and people focus was up. So you could say that's a cultural shift that's occurred due to the environment. The role of the leader, of course, is to anticipate these things and to create interventions and to role model the right behaviors to move the culture in the direction that we want it to move in. Of course, the first thing to do is to know as a leader where you do want to move the culture. You know, one method and model of doing it is to use the language of the 8 aspects and the colors. So you can choose to view and explain the culture to your team and staff in terms of a more entrepreneurial culture with high yellow, or a more commanding culture with the red, or a more formal risk-averse culture with the blue, which we certainly need for COVID-safe offices, or a more concerned and collaborative and supportive culture with the green. These are often terms that are used by leaders when they think about shaping the culture. And of course, Nicole, I know you've done many exercises in the past where you've helped leaders and top teams do some sort of analysis like that, and then take it one stage further into defining the culture that they're looking for in terms of the actual words, but making sure that that culture has a degree of balance around the mandala. So one risk is that we overdo one aspect of the culture because of our own biases as leaders, and we know that you know, a degree of balance is normally a good thing when you're trying to shape a culture.
Thanks, Stewart. Can I just pull out Sharon, just interested in your comment here, just around in terms of luminous spark, less sociable, less spontaneous, which is also reflected in the groupings here. Can you just speak to that? Because you're seeing the impact of that, meaning that we are all less connected within ourselves and others, and what that means in terms of the work that we need to do. Sharon, can you unmute? Are you still here? Let me just check. Ah, no. Oh, shame. I think she had to go. Okay. But, okay. So in terms of, I suppose it's just the implication would be how recognizing that if we are moving away from that inner work, how can we re-engage and help people look within, understanding self, understanding each other. So ensure that opportunity for that self-reflection and connectivity is taking place. And related to that, Janine shared here about a number, I can see Janine, you're still there. I don't know if you want to speak to it, but a number of things that you're doing also to try and enable consistent connection. So,
yes, it is after 5, so I'm here. So what we are doing is we've introduced new ways of working where we have daily hookups with each of our teams. So we run a call center in South Africa, and we have ways of using MS Teams where people can either show their screen or choose not to. They tend to not show their screen because it uses up less data. But we still have that interaction. And we've managed to even have virtual celebrations where we've been able to invite families to join the celebrations of award winners, where it would normally take place at a set venue. And only the award winner would actually be invited with their +1. And here we're actually finding different ways of celebrating life. So we had the awards where the whole family was invited. We sent a meal for 4 people, and everyone was able to join in. Then we had a connect session, which actually only took place an hour ago. Normally you would have space constraints in our office where you'd only be able to maybe have 50 to 75 people in the main room. Now we could have 150 people listening to our CEO's message. So we're definitely finding different ways of connecting with our individuals as well as teams, as well as the whole business. So as one door closes, I'm seeing that there's a lot more opportunities because we're forced to think differently. And by thinking differently, it's bringing out innovative thinking in terms of how do we choose to communicate with our people, because you can't just say, well, COVID is here and it's lockdown and we can't do things going forward. It's about actually opening up your thinking and saying, right, so how do we actually embrace our culture and engage with our people in a different way? And then we have promises which underpin how we operate as a business. And we just remind ourselves we have themes on a monthly basis within our teams where we actually embrace those promises and say, how do we keep those alive? And we actually still say, how are you seeing, in inverted commas, people displaying the promises? So we're not using the reason for not being in the office to ignore those activities or observations. We're trying to see how we are observing them in the way that we're interacting with each other.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks just for sharing that, Janine. Lots of ideas, I'm sure, for many, many people here. Is there any final questions from anybody? Final questions or thoughts? I can see this.
Not a question. Hi, it's Ula. I just wanted to say kudos and thank you very much, because you've made many of us lives simply easier by providing us with that data. And well, I'm guessing we cannot thank you enough. So thank you.
Hey, thank you, Ula. Thank you so much.
That's lovely. Well, that's a lovely point to end. If there's any other thoughts, please do contact us, mail us. I think you've got
and by the way, yes, I posted on Twitter. Just saying.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, please post away. That's great. Thanks, Ula. Yeah, our strength is research and creating innovation products, not necessarily marketing. So we always need that bit of push.
My strength is promoting others. So you're good. You're good. You're in good hands.
Okay. Be well, everyone. And thank you so much.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Cheers.
See you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Lovely seeing you again, Nicole.
Thank you so much.
See you, Paul. Bye.
Good video on Janine. So lovely to see you.
Yeah. Thank you, Elka, too. Yeah.
I'd love Elka's perspective with her brilliant research mind. Peace and
Great to see you.